Hey guys, let's talk about books. It's been a while and I've had a very nice break from YouTube. I've missed you guys, but life and work. I just had a sudden thought that there was no memory card in this camera, but it wouldn't be recording if there was a memory card. So that's how rusty I am. This is going to be a haul video because it's a long time since we've done a haul video. So please, if you have things to say about capitalism and read library books and read the books you already own, this is not going to be the video for you because there's 3 months worth of book buying. I do read books from the library, I do borrow books, blah, blah, blah. That's not what this video is about. Having said that, if you're willing to stick with me, hopefully we'll get through this fairly rapidly. Although, like, this is one of the piles. Like, the piles are multiple. Where was I going with this sentence? Oh, the way that I consume YouTube, and I assume many people consume YouTube, is in the background doing something else, crafting or cooking or doing the dishes. That's what this video can be. You don't need to be looking at me, just listen to the things I have to say about books. If you're new here since the Ulysses video, I'm so grateful. It has been radio silence, but you know, things might change. Things might not change because I work in retail in a tourist town in Australia. We're coming into summer and Christmas is going to be hectic, but we've always got books. I have waffled on enough, so let's get going with the list. Now, this is just in order that I purchased them, so it is what it is. I've also got my laptop here because otherwise there's no way otherwise that we're going to get through this. First up in this epic haul is Penric and the Bandit by Lois McMaster Bujold. This came out in 2024. These Penric books, they're all short stories. For the most part, they're novellas or short stories, and they are insta buys for me as soon as they come out. They don't even hit a pre-order stage because they're self-published. So I just buy them and read them the second they come out. This is the 13th installment in the Penric and Desdemona series. And I've talked about these before. I will link. There was one earlier in the year, I think. It was in January this year. So I can link that review down below. Obviously, I'm not going to do any reviews of these, although I have read this one, but I will read you the blurb. When Rosicrucian, a road-weary bandit and army deserter, spots a hapless blonde young man in a country inn with an intriguing treasure map, he thinks he's scouted an easy and lucrative victim. Attaching himself to odd traveller Penric seems simple enough, but when Roz's old enemies catch up from behind, his plans take a turn for the much worse. When Pen's claim that "I never travel alone" proves true in ways Roz never imagined, his world becomes more frightening still, but also much wider than he ever dared to dream. Penric and Desdemona is one of those series where if you want a cozy, happily for now ending, that's what you get from these. It's always nice to spend time with Penric and Desdemona and the people that come into their orbit. Next is this one on the top of the pile, Challenger, a true story of heroism and disaster on the edge of space by Adam Higginbotham. The call number here is 629.45, which is astronauts, manned space flight, same thing, right? And this was published in 2024. This is a book that I saw people posting the cover and I immediately was like, yes, that's going on the wish list. That cover is so evocative and I don't know if it's coming up well on camera. In person, it hurts my heart. And so I saw it and I thought, yes, that's on the wish list because of the cover. I'm a cover buyer. And then people in the book space, not on YouTube, but in other spaces, read it and said it was amazing. And so it was looking at me as I walked into a bookstore and it came home with me, as books tend in this pile are tending to do. This is the story of the Challenger disaster, which was in January 1986. People who they weren't civilians because they were trained astronauts, but they had come from civilian backgrounds rather than Navy or Air Force backgrounds, were attempting to go into space on Challenger and it blew up. I'm listening to it now because once I got past the American accent of the narrator, it's very easy listen. It's going into a lot of the history of other disasters that NASA had and other like test pilot big disasters, and then the training program for these civilians, how NASA came to even implement this training program for civilians because they wanted more black people, not minorities, but mainly black people and women in the space program for PR reasons. So I was into that, and now I'm at the part where they're just choosing the first of those civilians who will go into space. So I think I'm about 28% through. I don't know how far it is in the physical book. Am I having fun? Anyway, let me read you the blurb. On the morning of 28 January 1986, just 73 seconds into flight, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 7 people on board. Millions around the world witnessed the tragic deaths of the crew, which included schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. Why do we have to pull out just one? There's 7 of them. Like the assassination of JFK, the Challenger disaster is a defining moment in 20th century history, one that forever changed the way America thought of itself and its optimistic view of the future. Based on what I've read in this book so far, I'm definitely going to pick up Higginbotham's earlier book, Chernobyl, which you may guess from the title what that's about. Sounds so good. Where am I going to put these? Over here is my big computer. I'm just going to push the keyboard out of the way. Move my ruler and my drink bottle. Start a pile over there. All right, next up, Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a book that I've read and reviewed on this channel. I will link to that. It was published in 2021, and I had a Kindle edition that was obviously cheap on Kindle. And so when I found a cheap physical edition, it needed to come and live with me because I really enjoyed it. I think about it a lot. This is a book based on the premise any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is a famous quote from Arthur C. Clarke. This has a blurb. I will read you the blurb. Lyness is the lonely 4th daughter of the Queen and always getting in the way. But a demon is terrorising the land, and now she's an adult, albeit barely, with responsibilities, she tells herself. Although she still gets in the way, she understands that the only way to save her people is to invoke the pact between her family and the elder sorcerer, who has inhabited the local tower for as long as her people have lived here, though none in living memory has approached it. But Elder Near isn't a sorcerer, and he is forbidden to help, and his knowledge of science tells him the threat cannot possibly be a demon. Highly recommend you read this. It's quite thin. I guess it's technically a novel. It's 200 pages, and I really liked it. Next in this list is something I picked up cheap on Kindle. Again, this is the Oxford World Classics edition of the Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter is obviously out of copyright and you can get it for free, but I paid for this edition because the Oxford World Classics have contextual essays around them, and that makes understanding classics, well, it helps to understand classics when you can place them in a context of the social and who the author is and all those things. I enjoy that because that's the kind of nerd I am. The blurb says, a husband claims his wife after a 2-year absence, but the child she clutches is not his, and Hester Prynne must wear a scarlet A upon her breast, the sin of adultery visible to all. Under an assumed name, her husband begins his search for her lover, determined to expose what Hester is equally determined to protect. Defiant and proud, Hester witnesses the degradation of 2 very different men as moral codes and legal imperatives painfully collide. I didn't tell you that was by Nathaniel Hawthorne. It's published in 1850. And it's always interesting to me to read the blurb of classics because when they're classics, especially pop culture, has imparted to me what the main vibes of a book is, but blurbs always tell you something different. And I'm interested to read that. I've read a lot of classics this year, which is one of the reasons I picked that up. Moving on, I was in a good secondhand bookstore. I don't have one of those close to me, so this was an exciting find wandering around. It's John Galsworthy's The Forsyte Saga, Volume 1. I love The Forsyte Saga. I really enjoy the TV adaptation. This is a compendium of 3 novels based around the family of the Forsytes. And did I say this was published in 1921? I've read this. I read this on Kindle, like when I first got a Kindle, I want to say 2014. And I'm definitely maybe all of this year, definitely for months, I've been thinking time to reread, or at least rewatch the Forsyte Saga. And then found this in secondhand. It was a sign. It was a sign. John Galsworthy's magnificent, well-loved Forsyte Saga traces the changing fortunes of the wealthy Forsyte dynasty through 50 years of material triumph and emotional disaster. The first volume begins as the 19th century is drawing to a close and the upper middle classes, with their property and propriety, are becoming a dying section of society. The Forsytes are blind to this fact, clinging to their conventions and brilliant respectability. As dignified Soames Forsyte struggles to uphold the old moral code in the face of the social revolution resulting from the Great War, his wife Irene's extraordinary beauty causes even more disruption. The bitter feud between them will come to split the Forsyte family for 2 generations. I guess that's true, but that's not how I would describe that. Anyway, this has... Volume 1 has The Manor Property, In Chancery and To Let. Right next to the Galsworthy in this secondhand bookstore was A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I was reading Ulysses when I came across this, so I grabbed it. I already own Dubliners, so that's the 3 books set in the James Joyce Dublin cinematic universe. This one was published in 1916, and it features Stephen Dedalus, who is in, I don't know if he's in Dubliners, he's definitely in Ulysses. The blurb here says, the portrayal of Stephen Dedalus's Dublin childhood and youth, his quest for identity through art and his gradual emancipation from the claims of family, religion and Ireland itself, is also an oblique self-portrait of the young James Joyce and a universal testament to the artist's eternal imagination. This is nothing like Ulysses in terms of reading experience, and Dubliners, which is the short story collection, is different again. So I'm actually not mad to... Well, obviously I wouldn't have bought it if I didn't have any intention of reading it, but I'm not mad to stick it in the TBR sooner rather than later. Also, it's just really nice to buy things in a secondhand bookshop that aren't shit. Yeah, it's a novel experience for me because, like I said, I don't have a good secondhand bookshop near me. This one was me walking into a bookstore determined to walk out with something, and I walked out with Adrian Tchaikovsky's Service Model. This is 2024 published, and I picked it up because Tchaikovsky for 1, Murderbot vibes for 2. I will read you the blurb. Meet Charles TM, the latest in robot servant technology. Programmed to undertake the most menial household chores, Charles is loyal, efficient and logical to a fault. That is, until a rather large fault causes him to murder his owner. Understandably perplexed, Charles finds himself without a master and therefore worthless in a society reliant on artificial labour. Fleeing their household, he enters a world he never knew existed. Here, an age-old human hierarchy is a tongue twister. Here, an age-old human hierarchy is disintegrating, and a robot ecosystem devoted to its well-being is struggling to find a purpose. Charles must find out who he is in the world, blah, blah, blah. As I was reading that, I was thinking, I really am not mad about buying new books, even though they aren't as cheap as Amazon and they aren't as cheap as, you know, the reissues and mass market paperback editions, because the text is big, the book is big, and my elderly eyes and arthritic hands. In fact, I got reading glasses because I noticed when I was editing these videos that I would go to read a blurb and then I would go... So now I have reading glasses, but I find with the trade paperbacks I don't actually need that. The text is nice and big. This is actually one that I would probably prefer to have in a digital edition so that I could read it in bed. But, you know, I'm deliberately buying physical books, and so in light of that, bigger is better for me. Speaking of bigger and potentially better, I bought some beautiful things that I didn't need, and they are gorgeous. Look at that. Look at that. Look how shiny they make my face. Like it's, oh, I'm so in love. These are 10th anniversary editions of The Expanse. There's these two and another one that I haven't got yet. Leviathan Wakes and Caliban's War. They're actually very light for paperbacks. I don't hate that. Sprayed edges. Inside, whoop, take off. Inside we've got that and the end papers. That is, I'm just seeing if there's any spoilers there. No, that's a map of the Expanse solar system. No illustrations. Don't need illustrations. I love these books. I recently reread Leviathan Wakes and Caliban's War, although I don't know if I filmed Caliban's War. But I will read you the blurbs anyway, just in case you're not familiar with The Expanse. I'm just putting that dust jacket back on. The end papers in Caliban's War are the same, which is a bit disappointing. Let me see. I don't think they changed it based on the events of the first book. Let me look. They did not change it based on the events of the first book. So, I mean, that's good. This one has the red edges and inside. Oh, you probably saw this and I only just noticed it. That's inside Leviathan Wakes. That is cool. That is so cool. Anyway, I was showing you this. Caliban's War. And then the image in here. I feel like that's got to be Tycho Station. With the scaffolding. Or maybe not. Maybe that's Ganymede. Does that look like the mirrors? If you're familiar. Anyway, while I put those back together, I will read you the blurbs, non-spoilery blurbs. So the blurb for Leviathan Wakes says, humanity has colonized the solar system, Mars, the moon, the asteroid belt and beyond, but the stars are still out of our reach. Jim Holden is XO of an ice miner making runs from the rings of Saturn to the mining stations of the belt. When he and his crew stumble upon a derelict ship, the Scopuli, they find themselves in possession of a secret they never wanted. A secret that someone is willing to kill for and kill on a scale unfathomable to Jim and his crew. War is brewing in the system unless he can find out who left the ship and why. Detective Miller is looking for a girl. One girl in a system of billions, but her parents have money, and money talks. When the trail leads him to the Scopuli and the rebel sympathizer Holden, he realizes that this girl may be the key to everything. I'm just putting the covers back on, even though I should just do it after I finish filming, just so that they're back on. So that's Leviathan Wakes. Highly recommend that you read that, even if you have no interest in the whole series, because it's just a really awesome sci-fi detective noir. Caliban's War, I will edit this on the fly so there's no spoilers. We are not alone. On Ganymede, the breadbasket of the outer planets, a Martian Marine watches as her platoon is slaughtered by a monstrous super soldier. On Earth, our high-level politician struggles to prevent interplanetary war from reigniting. And spoilers, just redact that part. In the vast wilderness of space, James Holden and the crew of the Rocinante have been keeping the peace for the Outer Planets Alliance. When they agree to help a scientist search war-torn Ganymede for a missing child, the future of humanity rests on whether a single ship can prevent an alien invasion that may have already begun. I love The Expanse. I'm definitely going to grab the third one, Abaddon's Gate, in the special editions, and hopefully Orbit releases all of them in these special edition hardcovers because I love them and I will give them my money. This was a cover buy. I don't think I will ever read it. This is Inferno by Dante Alighieri. The Inferno is the first part of the Divine Comedy. I mean, I have no interest in reading it, but that cover is so amazing. If that's not picking up well on camera, I'm going to put an insert bigger because it's just so cool. Let me read you what Inferno is about. This was first published in 1320. Describing Dante's descent into hell with Virgil as a guide, Inferno depicts a cruel underworld in which desperate figures are condemned to eternal damnation for committing one or more 7 deadly sins. As he descends through 9 concentric circles of increasingly agonizing torture, Dante encounters many doomed souls before he's finally ready to meet the ultimate evil in the heart of hell, Satan himself. This new edition includes explanatory notes and illustrations depicting the different layers of hell. Oh, yeah. Circles of hell and layers of hell. That's upper hell and then lower hell, in case you needed like a map. Oh, and then more lower hell. If you're not familiar with the Divine Comedy, it's basically like a burn book that Dante wrote, and like people who pissed him off, he's just like in different layers of hell, which is hilarious. Next up is one that I learned about from Books and Things booktube channel, Katie Lumsden. Oh, in my eye. I'm just going to ignore it. I found her channel because I was searching up booktubers who were reading the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, and she came up, and then she read Cuddy because it was longlisted for that prize this year. And the way that she talked about Cuddy in her review were just really intrigued me. So it went on the wish list, and then when it was cheap on Kindle, I bought it. It did not win the Walter Scott Prize. It wasn't even shortlisted, but it did win the Goldsmiths Prize in 2023. It was published in 2023, and I will read you the blurb. Obviously, it's historical fiction. It says, Cuddy is a bold and experimental retelling of the story of the Hermit of St. Cuthbert, unofficial patron saint of the north of England. Incorporating poetry, prose, play, diary, and real historical accounts to create a novel like no other, Cuddy straddles historical eras, from the first Christian-slaying Viking invaders of the holy island of Lindisfarne in the 8th century to a contemporary England defined by class and austerity. Along the way, we meet, I guess, the characters of the book, and all the while at the centre sits Durham Cathedral and the lives of those who live and work around this place of pilgrimage. It sounds weird and hard and interesting, and I'm willing to give it a go because I picked it up cheap. I don't think I would have otherwise. But yeah, Katie just loved it, and the way that she spoke about it really influenced me, so I'm willing to try. Next up, we have a book that I pre-ordered, the second that I could pre-order, and that is James S. A. Corey, writers of The Expanse, and their new book, The Mercy of Gods. This is the first in the Captives War trilogy, came out in 2024, and I read it as soon as it turned up on my doorstep. The blurb here says, the Carracks, part Empire, part Hive. Oh, what's the time? We'll be quick. The Carracks, part Empire, part Hive, has waged wars of conquest for centuries, destroying or enslaving species across the galaxy in its conflict with an ancient and deathless enemy. When they descend on the isolated world of the Ungin, the human population is abased, slaughtered, and put in chains. The best and brightest are abducted, taken to the Carracks' world palace to join prisoners from 1,000 other species. Daffod Alcor, assistant to a prestigious scientist, is captured along with his team. Even if he doesn't suspect that his peculiar insight and skills will be the key to seeing past their captor's terrifying agenda. Swept up in a conflict beyond his control and vaster than his imagination, Daffod is poised to become humanity's champion and its betrayer. This is where his story begins. This was narrated by the same person who narrates The Expanse audiobooks, Jefferson Mays. So if that's something that you've experienced before, same narrator. I won't review it here. Forthcoming because I have read it. Let's squeeze in the last book in this pile before I have to reset the camera. And that is Network Effect by Martha Wells. This was published in 2020 and it is the first novel-length Murderbot installment. It's book 5 in the Murderbot series, and I love Murderbot. Big Murderbot fans around here. Highly recommend that you start at the very beginning, but the blurb doesn't have spoilers, so I'll read it for you. It calls itself Murderbot, but only when no one can hear. It worries about the fragile human crew who've grown to trust it, but only when no one can see. It tells itself that they're only a professional obligation, but when they're captured and an old friend from the past requires urgent assistance, Murderbot must choose between inertia and drastic action. Drastic action it is then. I'm so looking forward to this. All right, I'm going to reset the camera. All right, moving on to the second pile, and I have another one that just kind of just leapt into my physical hands when I was in a physical bookstore. I hate when that happens. This is The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World by Bettany Hughes, published in 2024. It's a very pretty cover. It was on my wish list for a long time, actually, because of the cover mainly, and that's why it came home with me. The call number is 930.1, which is archaeology, and it is about, can you guess, the seven wonders of the ancient world. Their names still echo down the ages: the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the Statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Mausoleum of Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Pharos Lighthouse at Alexandria. The seven wonders of the world were staggeringly audacious impositions on our planet. They were also brilliant adventures of the mind, test cases for the reaches of human imagination. Now only the Great Pyramid remains fully standing, yet the scale and majesty of these seven wonders still enthrall us today. There are some pictures in here, some colours. Insert, actually. Give you a reference of what we're talking about. Oh, and maps and stuff. Maps of ancient Mediterranean, I guess, to situate ourselves. So that's cool, and I'm greatly looking forward to that. Oh no, now I have to make room for the second pile. Shove you out of the way. This is more non-fiction, and mainly I bought it because I saw a lot of people talking about it. And that is Cal Newport's Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. I have read this one already. The call number is 650.1, which is personal success in business. Basically, I have two categories of how to life book: how to life and how to work. This is how to work. Cal Newport is famous for white man productivity books, but I haven't read any of his stuff before. He has one called Digital Minimalism, which interests me, and I think his most famous one was Deep Work, which would be fine if you had somebody in your life to take care of your life or you just worked, is the impression I got of that book. This one, he must have taken on that feedback because there is a lot of caveats of if you can implement these changes in your work life, if this is possible in the way that you work, if you can make the case to your bosses if you have bosses. I will read you the blurb and my thoughts on it will be forthcoming. Oh, the blurb is so long. Our current definition of productivity is broken. It pushes us to treat busyness as a proxy for useful effort, leading to impossibly lengthy task lists and ceaseless meetings. We are overwhelmed by all we have to do and on the edge of burnout, left to just slide between giving in to soul-sapping hustle culture or rejecting ambition altogether. But are these really our choices? Blah, blah, blah. In this timely and provocative book, Cal Newport harnesses the wisdom of these traditional knowledge workers, who I skipped over, to radically transform our modern lives, drawing from deep research on the habits and mindsets. Drawing from deep research on the habits and mindsets of a varied cast of storied thinkers, which are his case studies, Newport lays out the key principles of slow productivity, providing a more sustainable alternative to the aimless overwhelm that defines our current moment. Do fewer things, work at a natural pace, obsess over quality. That is the TLDR of this book. Published in 2024 and reviews forthcoming. Then, because I bought the first volume, I bought the third volume of the Forsyte Saga. I also bought the second volume with this one, and they sent me the wrong book. This is from World of Books Online. I am don't think I'll be buying from them again for various reasons, including this one. So this is the third volume of the Forsyte Saga. This one was published in 1931. This one doesn't actually contain anything about the Forsytes. It's about Forsyte cousins. In this final volume of the Forsyte Saga, Galsworthy writes about the lives and loves of the Charrel family, cousins of the Forsytes. For centuries, the Charrel sons have left their home of Conderford Grange to serve the state as soldiers, clergymen and administrators. But the 1930s brings uncertainty in a world of rapidly altering morals and unemployment. Galsworthy's portrayal of the effects of political change on individuals shows him as a great social novelist, as well as the author of one of the most gripping family sagas ever written. So I haven't read any of these, and I guess I should, but I would reread all of the Forsyte Saga first before I get to this. In a Kindle Daily Deal, I bought Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. I only picked this up because it was a book club book. And so I will read you the blurb. This won the Hugo Award. It's shortlisted for the Arthur C. Clarke Award, shortlisted for the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize, shortlisted for the Locust Award for Best First Novel. So it was getting lots of love. Published in 2023. The blurb reads, all her life, Kia has trained for the day she can avenge the destruction of planet Earth. Raised on Gaia Station alongside the last scraps of humanity, she is one of the best warriors of her generation, the sword of a dead planet. Then Command assigns her brother to certain death and relegates her to the nursery to bear sons, and she knows she must take humanity's revenge into her own hands. Alongside her brother's brilliant but seditious friend and a lonely captive alien, Kia must escape from everything she's ever known. If she succeeds, she will find a universe far more complicated than she was taught and far more wondrous than she could have ever imagined. I have many things to say about this book. I have read it because it was a book club pick. This is not the place for those thoughts. I finally listened to The Killings at Badger's Drift, which is the first book in the Midsummer Murders. It's what the Midsummer Murders TV show is based on. And I enjoyed it so much that I bought a secondhand copy of the book. This was published in 1987. Like I said, it's the first of Midsummer Murders, written by Carolyn Graham. If you're not familiar with Midsummer Murders, it is my favourite TV show of all time. It is so... it is just cozy mystery, murder mystery, and you know what you're going to get, and it's perfect for when you need an hour and a half of dedicated crafting time on a Sunday afternoon. And if you're familiar with the show and you've seen the very first episode, The Killings at Badger's Drift, then you know what happens in this. It's pretty much lifted verbatim, which is nice to see in an adaptation. The village of Badger's Drift is the essence of tranquility. But when resident and well-loved spinster Miss Simpson takes a stroll in the nearby woods, she stumbles across something she was never meant to see, and there's only one way to keep her quiet. That's the plot of every episode of Midsummer Murders. Miss Simpson's death is not suspicious, say the villagers, but Miss Lucy Bellbringer refuses to rest. Her friend has been murdered. She is sure of it. She calls on Detective Chief Inspector Barnaby to investigate, and it isn't long until the previously unseen seamy side of Badger's Drift is brought to light. But as old rivalries, past loves and new scandals surface, the next murder is not far away. Dun, dun, dun. I've put a reserve request for the second book at my library, and I'm definitely going to keep reading through all the ones my library has because it's just great. It's just great. Of its time. I will review that when I get to reviewing these books. I bought A Morbid Taste for Bones, which is the first Brother Cadfael and one that I didn't own in a physical edition. I'm sorry for stumbling over words. That's because I'm tired. I've talked for a long time. I reread this at the end of last year, so I will link to wherever I talked about it. And this is such a cool cover. It literally depicts the events of the book, which I enjoy when that happens. That's the murdered guy who has an arrow in him. That's Cadfael going, oh no, that's not okay. And I imagine that's the female character of the book because there's always a female love interest. and often a happily ever after romance B plotline. This was published in 1977. The blurb: in 1137, the ambitious head of Shrewsbury Abbey has decided to acquire the remains of St. Winifred for his Benedictine order. Brother Cadfael is part of the expedition sent to her final resting place in Wales, and they find the villagers passionately divided by the Benedictines' offer for the saint's relics. Canny, wise, and all too worldly, Cadfael isn't surprised when the taste for bones leads to bloody murder. The leading opponent to moving the grave has been shot dead with a mysterious arrow, and some say Winifred herself dealt the blow. Brother Cadfael knows that a carnal hand did the killing, but he doesn't know that his plan to unearth a murderer may dig up a case where the wages of sin may be scandal or his own ruin. I love Cadfael, as you guys know if you've spent any time here, and it's nice to complete my physical collection. This is all the Cadfaels here, and I'm only missing a few. I picked up all of these at a library sale, so I'm just filling in the gaps now. We're nearly there. I grabbed cheaply on Kindle The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen, published in 2023. I'm currently reading it and having a great time, actually. I'm excited to tell you about it. The call number is 676.2823, which is stationary. And the blurb: we see notebooks everywhere we go, but where did this simple invention come from? How did they revolutionize our lives, and why are they such powerful tools for creativity? And how can using a notebook help you change the way you think? In this wide-ranging story, Roland Allen reveals all the answers. Ranging from bustling markets of medieval Florence to the quiet studies of our greatest thinkers, he follows a trail of dazzling ideas, revealing how the notebook became our most dependable and versatile tool for creative thinking. La 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 la. I'm having a lot of fun, as I said, and I shall continue to keep reading it. Next is a short story I grabbed because I knew, well, it's KJ Parker and I enjoy the stuff that I read from them before, but also I was in an airport and this was only 37 pages long. So why not? This is published in 2024, short story called Set in Stone. The blurb is literally just: a sculptor struggles when he is commanded to perpetuate the lies of a deceitful and cruel king. I can't tell you any more than that without spoilers or going into review territory. This is the book that I've been waiting all year for. So exciting. Picked this up in a real bookstore on holiday, which is living the dream. Basically, The Empusium by Olga Tokarczuk. This is the English translation by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. Came out in September 2024. The blurb says, in September 1913, Mieczysław, a student suffering from tuberculosis, arrives at a health resort in what is now Western Poland. Every day its residents gather in the dining room to imbibe the hallucinogenic local liquor, to obsess over money and status, and to discuss the great issues of the day. Will there be war? Do devils exist? Are women inherently inferior? But disturbing events are happening in the guest house and its surroundings. Someone or something seems to be infiltrating their world. As our student attempts to decipher the sinister forces at work, little does he realize that they have already chosen their next target. Dun, dun, dun. Olga Tokarczuk wrote Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, which I love. And this one I devoured. No spoilers. Next up is one I have pre-ordered on audio, which is Odyssey by Stephen Fry. I copped some flack from some quarters when I said I was going to pre-order this in my Ulysses video, because obviously Ulysses is loosely based on the Odyssey. But I wanted it. Basically, I've listened to Mythos and Heroes. I haven't listened to Troy yet, but I guess I will. And basically, I really enjoy these retellings by Stephen Fry. I love Fry's narration, which is why I got it in audio. If you're not familiar with the story of the Odyssey, I'm going to read you the blurb. But I'm really looking forward to finishing listening to Challenger so that I can get listening to this one. Setting sail, here Odysseus dreams of lying in the arms of his beloved wife Penelope and teaching his son Telemachus a warrior's ways. However, gods toy with the desires of little mortals. Angered by this upstart's presumption, Poseidon, god of the ocean realms, curses our hero to wander the seas for 10 long years, encountering one-eyed giants, six-headed monsters, terrible storms, titanic whirlpools, hypnotic sirens, seductive witches, and jealous goddesses. Odysseus is tempted and tormented beyond any man's endurance, yet he is no mere mortal. The lure of his wife and son draws him, step by step, stroke by stroke, ever closer to home and his destiny. Probably no spoilers there, but I'm looking forward to it. I was on holiday, you see, and one of the things that happens when I'm on holiday in Hobart is I meet up with friend and viewer of the YouTubes, John, and we go on a little book crawl. And so I need to buy a book from every one of the bookshops that we go into. It's how it is. So this is not in the order that I bought them. I will put them in the order that I bought them. The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Is that going to pick up how amazing this cover is? Now, I picked this up simply because I have to rearrange myself. Again, I have this edition of The Left Hand of Darkness. I don't want to put the book in front of me because the microphone won't pick me up. So I have this. I enjoyed this. This matches. I bought this. No idea what it was about, but it came home with me. Let's find out what it was about. This is published in 1974, so after The Left Hand of Darkness. And the blurb says, Shevek is attempting to find a new theory of time, but there are those who are jealous of his work and will do anything to block him. So he leaves his homeland, hoping to find a place of more liberty and tolerance. Initially fettered, Shevek soon finds himself being used as a pawn in a deadly political game. That sounds awesome. I want to read that so bad. And hopefully these editions are by Galance. Would love for more of these Le Guins in this cover style because I think they're cool. I mean, obviously the inside is important too, but I'm a cover buyer. We've established that. Then at the next bookshop, I actually didn't find anything I wanted. And this book, which I told myself I was not going to buy new because I could definitely just buy it when it's a bit older and a bit cheaper. I'm not going to read it straight away. This was right here at the register, so I bought it. Cunning Folk, Life in the Era of Practical Magic by Tabitha Stanmore. Call number here is 133.43, which I think is practical magic. Let me check. Witchcraft and magical practice. If you can see behind me, from here onwards, and from here backwards is magic. And so that's where this fits in. It is my interest. It is what I did a lot of study on at university. Practical magic in this instance, the blurb explains it, but it is basically if you're not someone who's doing prayer, ritual magic, or like witchcraft magic, you just need somebody to like help you find something that was lost or do a magic, like a love spell, that sort of thing. You paid somebody who knew what they were doing to do that spell for you. And that's Cunning Folk. Obviously, cunning now has the derogative meaning. And that comes from people who are casting aspersions on Cunning Folk. Let me read you the blurb. It will probably explain it way better. Imagine the year is 1600 and you've lost your precious silver spoons. Or perhaps your neighbour has stolen them. Or maybe your child has a fever. Or you're facing trial. Or you're looking for love. Or you're hoping to escape a husband. What do you do? In medieval and early modern Europe, your first port of call might well have been Cunning Folk, practitioners of service magic. Neither feared like witches nor venerated like saints, they were essential to everyday life, a ubiquitous presence in a time when the supernatural was surprisingly mundane. For people from all walks of life, practical magic was a cherished resource with which to navigate life's many challenges. I feel like this is going to rest heavily on English sources, which the way that magic and witchcraft was approached and legislated against is different in England to many other parts of Europe. But English sources are more accessible, especially early modern English, because there are lots of early modern English records and it's pretty readable to somebody who speaks modern English. So I'm interested to have a look. It's actually not that long. in terms of the big text and the lots of white space. So I will report back once I've read it. Yeah, I've read stuff about cunning folk before, and of course lots of stuff about magic and witchcraft in general. So that's good and bad in that you can spot when people aren't maybe telling the whole truth or manipulating the evidence that we have in support of a story. But at the same time, I don't know what I was going with that sentence. If one of the things about reading in an area that you're familiar with is that you can easily spot things that don't add up, but also if the author is talking about something you know and they're getting it right, and then they talk about something you don't know, you can have reasonable confidence that they're getting it right there as well. I like that. Then the last thing is Shirley Jackson, The Lottery and Other Stories. Now I very nearly picked up, in fact I did pick up the edition that matches I've got this edition of Kafka, and there's an edition of The Lottery in this mini cloth-bound version. And it was very pretty, and it's the one that I picked up straight away. And then there was a bit of a disagreement between me and John about, and the bookseller Richard, over buying The Lottery. And eventually John bought the cloth cover, and I bought this one because the other Shirley Jackson that I own is this Penguin Modern Classics edition, so they're just going to match. And this also has more stories in it. So I'm currently this far through, not very far, but enough far. Shirley Jackson. Oh, did you hear that? People walking upstairs. This was published in 1949. And the blurb says, an excellent host finds himself turned out of his home by his own guests. A woman spends her wedding day frantically searching for her husband-to-be. And in Shirley Jackson's best-known story, a small farming village comes together for a terrible lottery. The creeping unease of lives squandered and the unspoken terrors of everyday suburban life are captured with brilliant clarity and sly humour in these tales by a master of the short story form. I have to agree with that assessment. I'm enjoying it, but it's definitely reading a short story and then putting it down and digesting. It's not something that I can race through. So that was at the third bookstore that we stopped at. And finally, which never ever happens in a haul, Ash bought a book. And it's probably something that I'm going to read because Ash has already given up on it. And that is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is the first in a trilogy called the Licanius Trilogy. This one published in 2014. Now, Ash picked it up and was very interested in it because I think on the back it says, fans of Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson will find much to admire, and Ash likes both those authors. But then he opened it up and the text is very small, and Ash has also had a 40th birthday and probably needs reading glasses. So I don't think he'll read him. And I might have to keep my eye out for a cheap digital edition. But I will probably read it because the blurb says, it has been 20 years since the godlike augurs were overthrown and killed. Now, those who once served them, the gifted, are spared only because they have accepted the rebellion's 4 tenets, vastly limiting their own powers. As a young gifted, Davian suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was ever born. He and others like him are despised. But when Davian discovers he wields the forbidden powers of the augurs, he sets in motion a chain of events that will change everything. La la la, epic fantasy. So I can see why Ash picked it up. I can empathise with why he's not going to read this physical copy. It's not something that I would have picked up, and so now that it's on the shelf, it might get read. And maybe we need to have a read the TBR challenge instead of buying more TBR challenge. Don't know how I feel about that. I have been tracking this year how much I'm spending on books, not just which books I'm buying. And this week I definitely changed the spreadsheet calculation from total amount spent to average per book spent to make it a lot more palatable, which was a bit of a wake-up call. But also, don't buy books if you can't afford books. The library exists. We love libraries. We love lending books. And that is a perk of buying physical ones, is that I could lend this to you and then you could give me the TLDR. So that's where we're at. That is an epic haul. Thank you for sticking with me. Please tell me if you've read any of these, if you're hyped for any of these, if I should bump any of these up the list. Although I'm definitely a mood reader, I will take your feedback into consideration for sure. Based on this, if there's anything that I should be adding to my purchasing horizons. And most of all, thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for subscribing. Subscribing is probably the best thing that you can do to support a small channel. Channels with under 1,000 subscribers don't get any kickbacks from YouTube in terms of ad money or anything like that. So I appreciate everyone who's hit subscribe, and that means you might even come back for the next one where I talk about some of these that I've already read.